I've known Bernard for a long time. I met him initially in his capacity of an important person in Israel and beyond in terms of patient rights. He's the co-founder of the Israeli Association of Rare Diseases and a national representative at the conference of the European Genetic Interest Group and Eurogen Test. But Bernard has a lot of other things that he's doing. An important part of you, if I may say that, is that you are a journalist and a filmmaker, and you've done a lot of work in this regard around the globe, in Europe, in Africa, in Canada, on issues around support, human needs, human solidarity, and you will talk about not all of that, but much of that now. So thank you very much, Bernard, for joining us. And like David, Bernard is also one of our advisory board members. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. I've learned a lot today, and besides learning a lot, I've been impressed by the passion with which people have spoke about solidarity. And passion and art are two words, two subjects that go together, so maybe it's appropriate that we talk about art now. Okay, it's August 30th, 2018. An art exhibit is opening in Tel Aviv. How do I advance? Oops. 1 second. Okay. There's a nice crowd. People are greeting each other. Art critics and journalists are present, and the art looks interesting. But something going on here might raise a few questions. The three exhibiting artists, Shira Barak, Lital Rubinstein, and Keshet Ben-Ami, are all in their 20s, recent art college graduates. How is it that these unknown young artists are getting this kind of attention? And what exactly is the connection between the three different presentations? The quick answer to the first question is that bringing the works of young artists to the public is one of the goals of the artist collective sponsoring the exhibit. My talk today is about artist-run initiatives and the impact they are having all over the world. Why are more and more artist collectives being founded? Do they have anything in common? What can those of us who are working in other areas of solidarity learn from them? And I would refer to a phrase that was used a few times this morning about the cultivation of disposition for solidarity. I invite you to keep that phrase in the back of your mind as we go through my little micro-study. So we'll be looking at artist groups in Turkey, Germany, Ohio, Russia, the Netherlands, Sweden, as well as Israel. I will start with the Alfred Gallery in Tel Aviv. I should mention that as I talk about different artists today, I will be showing samples of their works. So if nothing else, you'll at least see some interesting art. Okay, so it is 2005, and 27-year-old Gidon Smolansky is one of about 200 artists who graduate each year from Israeli art colleges. Gidi is about to disappear into his home studio. There are very few opportunities for young artists to break into the art scene. 5 commercial art galleries control the playing field, and they take on very few new artists. He is not likely to have much contact with other artists or the general public for the next few years, which is how long it normally takes artists to create enough pieces for an exhibition. That's assuming most of his time isn't taken up by teaching or some other work. But Gidi and a group of other young artists come up with an idea to start an artist collective known as the Alfred Gallery. We were young, naive, and didn't have a clue about the business side of the art world, recalls Gidi. But we felt that we could breathe new life into the art scene and break the establishment's stranglehold. So Gidi and 9 other artists joined forces and put together in a hole-in-the-wall space a gallery. Each month, they each contribute about $50 a month. Once a month, a different member does a show curated by another member. Once a year, they raise money through an annual art sale. Surprisingly, perhaps, there is a lot of interest in the Alfred concept. Other artists want to participate. The public wants to see what they are doing. 13 years later, Alfred has grown into a 350-meter complex and has an operating budget of $200,000. They now are offering workshops, artist residencies, and international exchanges. The key turning point occurred in 2013 when Alfred realized that by becoming a nonprofit organization, they would qualify for government grants. And they were now able to give other artists a chance to exhibit. So, if we return to the show we looked at earlier, the three artists designed the collective exhibit that was one of hundreds of submissions selected in an open call for exhibits on the theme of vision failure. Each of their pieces of art is connected to some sort of ritual, which their curator explains as, quote, full of vision but inherently fails. So we see items connected to a Japanese tea ceremony, fortune-telling devices, and some kind of enigmatic ancient rite. Thanks to Alfred, the artists had a budget for materials and the opportunity to display their works to the public. Alfred, however, is not a complete success story, or at least it's an incomplete story. We continue to operate on thin ice, says Giddy Smolansky. Monthly membership fees are still needed, and members continue to support themselves through other jobs. However, we have remained faithful to our principles and see ourselves as activists. Let's now look at some other artist-run initiatives. This may not look like a typical artist studio, but this is part of Berlin's top EV collective, which includes a biolab equipped with centrifuges, a PCR, electronic, and biology lab equipment. Top Lab is a good example of how artists working together can experiment and do things they might not be able to do on their own. TOP is an interdisciplinary group that includes not just artists, but also designers, architects, filmmakers, writers, scientists, activists, and a cook. The lab was founded by Mindaugas Gapsifius, a Lithuanian artist who came to Berlin after studying art at the Vilnius Academy of Arts and Philosophy at the University of London. Miga describes the goal of the biolab as to carry out scientific experiments through an artistic lens. In one biolab project, Maike Effenberg took samples of the microbiome of different people and examined how the microorganisms interact on an agar plate. Her idea was to speculate that if the microorganisms do well together, then the people involved might get along. This may sound like a dating service, but as Maike explains, her installation was about questioning how processes occur in nature at a subconscious level. Miga's own works examine technologies that invent and solve problems using processes that imitate those of the human mind. In this installation, Miga examines the connections made between computers during an internet search and, quote, questions the creativity of machines without presuming that humans are the only creative force, unquote. I'm oversimplifying the philosophy's work, but my main point is that a collective like TOP can nurture artistic experimentation that is less likely to occur in any other kind of setting. Now let's move to a different field, Turkey and the legendary Hafriyat Collective, which had an extremely strong impact on the Turkish art scene. Hafriyat was founded in 1996 by Mustafa Pankar and a group of other artists for many of the same reasons that Alfred was founded. We were anti-elitist against the gallery system, says Mustafa. In the beginning, the artists supported themselves from their own pockets, but eventually they found an advertising agency that supported them. And they're, by the way, the only group that I came across that actually had private money. Everybody else is working either out of their own pockets or with public funds. People could see a type of energy in our exhibits, says Mustafa, a type of energy you don't see in curated exhibitions where the artists don't know each other. In many exhibits, like this one on the theme of crimes against women and the inadequate laws protecting them, They chose a single subject in which everyone contributed ideas. We were 10 people aiming at a kind of shared artistic mind, recalls Mustafa. So they would work together on exhibits on consumerism, another one on fictional election posters, and another one about religion, which was condemned by religious groups. Hafriyat lasted for about 15 years. After 25 exhibitions, we were exhausted, explains Mustafa, and we wanted to work individually. The group had become too crowded, and it was hard to make decisions. Hafriyat did significantly open up the Turkish art scene. But in the days since Hafriyat disbanded, the political scene in Turkey has, of course, changed dramatically. Mustafa today works in Berlin, as do many of the original members, and points out that it's unlikely that Hafriyat could have been founded in the current political climate. This brings me to another Turkish collective known as Passage, and the subject of socially engaged art. Passage was founded in 2013 by Cecilia Yali and a group of 5 other artists and curators. They were based for a while in a local restaurant in a disadvantaged neighborhood of Istanbul, working with children and using art to help improve their self-esteem and deal with such issues as drug abuse and domestic violence. Today, Cecile is working in Italy with asylum seekers from Africa in the town of Villa Cristina. She is trying to get the asylum seekers to deal with the memories of their journey to Europe and use those memories to produce an artistic creation that will say something about the journey of the refugees to their new home. Working with the city, Cecile plans to take a neglected area and revitalize it with the art that they produce. Continuing with this theme of connecting with the community, we go to the wheat fields of Ohio. In 2009, Ian Bredenbach graduated from Wright State University and started to work with the manager of a private art gallery in Dayton, Ohio. It was a terrible experience, says Ian. The guy spent all his time trying to sell, but had no interest in understanding what I was trying to do. Ian decided to move to the town of Findlay, population 40,000, a town with no art scene, but with cheap rent for a studio and art gallery, which is what Ian set up together with a group of friends as part of an artist collective called the Neon Heater. The Neon Heater became a place where Ian could show his own art, which he describes as long-form narrative art that tells massive stories, and where he could invite other artists from other places to show their works. But he still felt that something was missing. It was hard to get the people of Findlay to come to exhibits, and they had a problem connecting with what was going on. I began to realize that the art world has gone out of its way to separate from the world, says Ian. If you read artist statements, they are often almost completely unintelligible to the average person. And this is something that resonates with me. Has anyone ever had that experience? Okay. How then, asks Ian, can artists connect with their local communities? To look for different ways, Ian began to contact other artist collectives in the Midwest, and he discovered about 100 collectives existing throughout the region, and he is beginning to network with them. He does not yet have an answer to the question of how to connect with people who have had not had much exposure to modern art, but he has obtained a research grant from a university to work on that. This mission of bringing contemporary art to an unconnected community is something that is also happening in northern Russia. Murmansk, anybody know where Murmansk is? Okay. Is a city on the Arctic Ocean near the Norwegian border where more than half the population works for the Navy or Army. There is an art museum, but it features mainly landscapes and traditional art. No one ever tried to mount an exhibit of contemporary art until Ivan Galutin and the artist-run initiative he heads called Gallery Ch9 came along. Ivan grew up in Murmansk, but moved to Norway in the 1990s, where he studied art in Oslo, and then when he came back on a visit in 2014, he decided to work together with some local artists to try to bring contemporary art to his hometown. Says Ivan, I saw it as a kind of laboratory experiment. I wanted to find out what would happen if some of the same kind of works that were shown in a place like Oslo with a thriving art scene would be shown to a completely new audience. Ch9 launched Induction, Murmansk's very first video exhibit. There was one video which was 45 minutes long, which consisted of shadows, something that people in Norway might have watched only for a few minutes and moved on, recalls Ivan. But here we found the audience was willing to watch it through to the end. The exhibit was considered a success, and Ivan felt that his experiment was off to a good start. But all this unraveled when Gallery Ch9 tried to do a collaboration with the Murmansk Art Museum. Ivan had come across a collection of drawings made by Russian soldiers on the front lines between Russia and Norway during World War II. What Ivan noticed was that despite the wartime situation, the drawings done by the soldiers were all of peaceful domestic situations. So Ivan took these drawings and created an exhibition that he called The Withdrawal of the Red Army. He described it as a meditation on what we do in times of stress. Quote, the distillation of in-between moments of time when the actors cease being framed procedurally within a military operation and become people once more. However, when the Murmansk Museum got wind of what he was doing, they decided to cancel the collaboration, saying, you cannot mix the sacred heritage of World War II with unpatriotic contemporary art. But Ivan went ahead anyway, and with funding from Norway, did the exhibit in both Norway and at the Ch9 Gallery in Murmansk. Ivan claims that this exhibit was a big success in Murmansk. But how do we know what he is saying is true? Was this exhibit in Murmansk really successful? Well, it turns out that Ivan does have a good answer. There is a Russian tradition of having people sign guest books after viewing exhibits. They do sort of mini reviews or critiques which are much more detailed than when this sort of thing is done in the West. And so Ivan is able to show guest books in which it is clear that even if the viewers did not like what they saw, they were very much engaged. In fact, the guest books are so interesting that Ivan's group has launched a new book which consists of a compilation of comments made in the Murmansk guest books. Finally, let's take a brief look at the Netherlands, where I'm told no survey of artist-run spaces would be complete without looking at a lively scene of about 30 artist-run initiatives. One example is 1646 in The Hague, which occupies an anti-squat space. It's run by Johan Gustafsson and 3 other artists. They are essentially curators or programmers who commission art exhibits, but don't actually present their own works. So this is another variation on roles that independent artists can take on. As you can see, whether we are talking about the Netherlands or Murmansk, artist collectives seem to have much in common. But now that we know that, the question is, do they know that? Do they share their experiences with other artists around the world? And this maybe comes back to the idea of cultivating a disposition for solidarity. Artists, by nature, tend to be individualists trying to express themselves in their own distinct way. Walking a lonely road, someone said, is often the basis for creativity. So even if artists have made the big step of actually connecting with other artists in their own country, is it likely that they would make the giant step of connecting with other artists around the world? Until recently, the answer would have been no, but today there are 4 different groups working in one way or another internationally. One, founded by Johan Gustafsson, is the Alternative Art Guide, a website showing artist-run spaces around the world. It's intended to be mainly a kind of guide that artists can use when traveling to meet other like-minded artists elsewhere in the world. Another is the Supermarket Art Fair, founded in Stockholm by a group of artists that includes Andreas Rybung and is co-managed by Alice Masenelkunova, a Czech painter and curator. We founded the Supermarket Art Fair, says Andreas, as a reaction to the Stockholm market, a large commercial art fair attended mainly by art dealers and collectors. We try to bring artists from around the world together and give them a chance to present their works and discuss ideas of interest. In 2018, Supermarket exhibited the works of more than 50 artist groups from 25 countries, including Egypt, Morocco, and Tanzania. The fair was attended by more than 4,000 visitors. Andreas is also the founder of another organization called AIM, Artists, Initiatives, Meetings Network, which continues the supermarket idea of networking and gives artists a chance through regular meetings to exchange information about funding and organization. They currently have groups in 11 countries, including Bulgaria, Latvia, and Ireland. Finally, there is the Artist-Run Alliance, which is perhaps the most ambitious of the networking groups. The Alliance is trying to build a truly global artist community. We are developing relationships among artists from different countries and giving artists a chance to reach a global audience, says Gidi Smolansky, one of the founders. The Alliance has been able to identify more than 1,000 collectives in 50 countries. Interestingly enough, though the Alliance itself tends to be a kind of umbrella organization for artist initiatives, the Alliance itself does not plan to be a collective. They have ruled out requiring members to pay membership fees. It is to be externally funded, currently through private donations, and they are working on a number of business model ideas. The project is in the beta stage and has staff members spread across 4 countries. To sum up, let me mention some of the characteristics we have observed about the artist-run initiatives. They are expanding the playing field by creating an alternative to the commercial art scene. They are breaking new ground by exploring subjects they would have trouble reaching on their own. They often share an artistic mind by working as a team on a variety of subjects. They often delve into politics and social action topics using the strength of numbers to tackle controversial subjects. And they are able to connect to the local community by bringing art to people who wouldn't otherwise be engaged with contemporary art. And let me make a few general observations. Artists may be seen as banding together to get funding, but my impression is that what is more important to them is that they see themselves as activists with a social vision of a world in which art plays a bigger role. The idea of working collectively implies a certain amount of equality among members. I observed that paradoxically there was often a single leadership figure behind each initiative. What is the decision-making process like in these egalitarian groups? That is a subject worthy of a study of its own. How long do the groups last? In the words of Alice of the Supermarket Art Fair, 5 years is a lot, 15 years is rare, but there have been some that have been around for even longer, such as Stockholm's Gallery 53, which was founded in 1959. Do the collectives offer a replacement for commercial art? No, the two are complementary, the proof being that collective members often exhibit in the commercial galleries. I think there will be more and more collective activity in this area, in part because of the networking of groups like Supermarket and the Artist-Run Alliance. However, this is still a largely untapped global community in which networking and collective activity can reap many benefits. I'd like to close with an observation made by Gidon Smolansky, who noted that the guiding principle that led to Alfred's success was their assumption that many other artists had the same needs that they did. Quote, "Our belief that there were many other people out there just like us turned out to be true." I think that for many people working in other areas of solidarity, this is a statement that will ring true. Thank you.